Welcome back, gearheads. In the 1980s, while muscle cars took a back seat and boxy sedans ruled the streets, a few American automakers slipped performance into the most unsuspecting packages. No spoilers, no hype, just quiet power. One of these cars could dust a Mustang in a straight line, but most people just saw it as their uncle's grocery getter. These are the greatest unknown American sleeper beasts of all time. 1984, Buick Century T-Type. A car built for retirement homes, but quick enough to spook a Camaro? Let's talk about the Buick Century T-Type. After all, it was your average mid-size commuter, a car you'd expect to see in a retirement home parking lot, not the drag strip. But the 1984 Century T-Type quietly flipped that image on its head. Buick had already started experimenting with turbocharging in the early 80s, and while the Regal Grand National hogged the spotlight, the Century T-Type was its under-the-radar sibling. Under the hood, it carried a 3.8-liter turbocharged V6 producing around 150 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque. That might not sound like much today, but in a car that weighed under 3,200 pounds, it was enough to get the Century moving 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds. Respectable for a car that looked more at home at PTA meetings than stoplight showdowns. The Century T-Type also came with upgraded suspension, firmer steering, and blackout trim to hint, very subtly, at its performance aspirations. It wasn't flashy, and that's exactly what made it dangerous. People simply didn't expect this beige Buick to pull away from them when the light turned green, but it wasn't without its flaws. The transmission was sluggish, and the front-wheel drive setup meant torque steer could catch you off guard. The styling didn't age as well as some of its siblings, and despite the T-Type badge, it never gained much love from collectors or enthusiasts. Still, that's exactly why it earns a spot on this list. It flew low, stayed quiet, and packed more punch than its curbside appearance ever let on. And as the next car proves, Buick wasn't the only brand sneaking speed into unexpected places. 1986, Ford LTD LX. If the Buick Century T-Type was a surprise, the Ford LTD LX took things a step further by hiding muscle car DNA in the shell of a government-issue sedan. The LTD LX looked like something straight out of a municipal parking lot, square, conservative, and utterly forgettable. But Ford had other ideas for this boxy four-door. In the early 1980s, Ford was deep into the Fox body era, and the LTD LX was quietly built on that same versatile platform. That meant it shared more than a little with the Mustang GT of the time, specifically the 5-liter high-output V8. It cranked out 165 horsepower and 245 pound-feet of torque, fed through a 4-speed automatic with a performance shift pattern. On paper, that pushed the LTD LX from 0 to 60 in around 8.5 seconds. Not blazing fast by modern standards, but for a full-size American sedan in 1986, it raised eyebrows. It wasn't just about straight-line power either. Ford tuned the suspension for handling, added a rear sway bar, installed 4-wheel disc brakes, and gave it subtle but sportier visual cues: blackout trim, turbine wheels, and a unique LX badge. But unless you knew exactly what you were looking at, it just looked like another car your uncle might drive to the office. Its weaknesses weren't hard to find. The interior was plain, the automatic transmission didn't always make the most of that V8, and it never received the marketing push that the Mustang or Thunderbird did. As a result, production numbers stayed low, just under 3,300 units in its final year. But that obscurity is exactly what made the LTD LX such a perfect sleeper. And the next car on the list? It took the same stealthy formula and added a little more attitude. 1987 Dodge Lancer Shelby. Moving from the conservative lines of the LTD LX, the next car came with a sharper edge, but still hid in plain sight. It looked like a rental car pulled straight from an airport lot, until you checked the build sheet and found a surprising name stamped across it: Carroll Shelby. After the muscle car era faded, Dodge turned to smaller, turbocharged 4 cylinders to bring performance back into the spotlight. The Lancer Shelby was part of this rebirth. It started life as a standard Dodge Lancer, a mid-size front-wheel drive sedan that blended into traffic. But Shelby took 800 of them and gave each one a healthy dose of tuning magic. Power came from a turbocharged 2.2-liter inline-4, producing 175 horsepower and 175 pound-feet of torque. That was enough to launch it from 0 to 60 in about 7.2 seconds, which made it faster than many V8s of the time. It wasn't just the power that made it special. Shelby gave it upgraded suspension, quicker steering, vented 4-wheel disc brakes, and even a leather-wrapped Momo steering wheel, features rarely found on a Dodge sedan. The body got some subtle tweaks, but nothing loud or over the top. It still looked like a regular Lancer, which made it easy to underestimate, but the Lancer Shelby had its flaws. Turbo lag was noticeable, and the build quality didn't always inspire confidence. Interior plastics were cheap, and the styling, even with the Shelby touches, wasn't exactly timeless. Still, it struck a balance between anonymity and aggression, in a way few cars managed at the time. And while Shelby's work on the Lancer didn't grab headlines like the Mustangs of old, the next car proves that even GM knew how to tuck performance into something completely unexpected. 1984 Chevrolet Celebrity Eurosport VR. After the Lancer Shelby's unexpected punch, the Chevrolet Celebrity Eurosport VR kept a low-profile theme going, maybe even too well. This one looked like a rental car with a body kit, but there was more happening underneath than the average driver ever realized. By the mid-1980s, GM's A-body platform was all over American roads. The Chevrolet Celebrity was the family hauler of choice, reliable, boxy, and thoroughly unremarkable. But in a quiet effort to compete with European sport sedans, Chevrolet introduced the Eurosport VR. It wasn't a mass-produced trim. It was a dealer-installed performance package created by Choo Choo Customs of Tennessee. Only about 200 units were ever made, making it one of the rarest on this list. Under the hood, it offered a 2.8-liter V6, pushing 130 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque. Not earth-shattering, but enough to push the lightweight body from 0 to 60 in around 9 seconds. What mattered more was the handling. The Eurosport VR got stiffer suspension, sport-tuned shocks, better tires, and a quicker steering ratio. It hugged corners tighter than any other Celebrity and felt planted in a way most front-wheel drive sedans of the era didn't. But there were trade-offs. It still used the standard 3-speed automatic, which held back performance. Interior quality was basic, and outside of the red accents and aggressive cladding, it was still clearly a budget car underneath. It never had a chance to stand out, especially with such a limited production run. Still, for those lucky enough to find one today, it's a rare reminder that even the most beige cars of the 80s could hide a secret edge. Like uncovering forgotten machines like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more sleepers coming up you won't want to miss. 1985 Pontiac 6000 STE. Coming off the heels of the rare Eurosport VR, the 1985 Pontiac 6000 STE didn't just continue the sports sedan conversation, it rewrote the script. While the Chevy Celebrity flirted with flair, the STE brought real engineering to the table, making it one of GM's most quietly confident punches at the European elite. BMW who? Pontiac's 6000 STE didn't just look the part, it challenged the Euro crowd with surprising precision. Pontiac launched the STE Special Touring Edition as its answer to the rising tide of Bavarian dominance. Built on the same A-body as the Celebrity, the STE came armed with a 2.8-liter V6 pushing out 135 horsepower and 165 pound-feet of torque. That translated to 0 to 60 times in the mid-90s, modest on paper but matched with handling that left jaws on twisty roads. With four-wheel independent suspension, four-wheel disc brakes, quicker steering, and a chassis that actually communicated with the driver, this car didn't just turn, it carved. Inside, it leaned into the tech-forward future, a digital dashboard, onboard trip computer, rally-style gauges, all wrapped in a package that could have easily been mistaken for a teacher's car in the school parking lot. But the moment it hit an on-ramp, it told a very different story. Still, it wasn't without flaws. The 3-speed auto held it back, and the torque steer reminded you this was still a front-wheel drive GM product. But flaws and all, it made a bold statement. You didn't need a German badge to feel connected to the road. So what do you think? Was the STE a breakout performer that got overshadowed, or just a mid-level sedan with a loud exhaust? Drop a comment and let me know. 1989 Mercury Cougar XR7 Supercharged. While the Pontiac 6000 STE flirted with European refinement, the 1989 Mercury Cougar XR7 brought brute force back into the conversation, quietly. By the end of the 80s, most people had written off the Cougar as a soft, personal luxury coupe. But in 1989, Mercury quietly rewired that image with a version that most people didn't see coming. This new XR7 was built on Ford's MN12 platform, shared with the Thunderbird Super Coupe, and it brought real engineering to the table. Power came from a supercharged 3.8-liter V6, pushing out 210 horsepower and 315 pound-feet of torque. That was a big jump from the outgoing V8s of previous years, and it showed on the road. With 0 to 60 times in the low 7-second range, this thing moved faster than it looked, especially for something often parked next to beige sedans at your local grocery store. The suspension was fully independent, the chassis was stiffer than before, and it came standard with a 5-speed manual, something you'd never expect in a Mercury at the time. It even had optional automatic ride control and a host of comfort features that made it equally capable on a twisty road or long highway cruise. Still, the weight was a problem. At over 3,700 pounds, the XR7 wasn't exactly nimble, and despite all the tech, it lacked the polished steering feel of European rivals. But it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to outrun expectations, and it did that well. The XR7 made a statement without needing flashy badges or bold styling. It whispered performance through a padded vinyl roof, and sometimes that's what makes a true sleeper. 1989, Ford Thunderbird SC. Sliding over from the Cougar XR7, it only makes sense to stop at its close cousin, the 1989 Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe. Both cars shared the same MN12 platform and a mission to shake off their image as aging personal luxury cruisers. But the Thunderbird SC took things even further. Under the hood sat the same Eaton M90 supercharged 3.8-liter V6, producing 210 horsepower and a hefty 315 pound-feet of torque. But it wasn't just about numbers. The Super Coupe was engineered with balance in mind. Ford fitted it with a fully independent suspension, 4-wheel disc brakes, and even adjustable shocks. That gave the Thunderbird a level of handling precision that was rare for any American car in this price range at the time. 0 to 60 came in at about 7 seconds flat, respectable for 1989, and surprisingly quick for something that still looked like a banker's commuter car. It even offered a 5-speed manual, which gave drivers real control over that torque-heavy engine. The SC didn't shout for attention. It waited quietly at the light, then pulled away stronger than most expected. But for all its engineering strengths, the Super Coupe was not light on its feet. Weighing nearly 3,800 pounds, it could feel a bit sluggish in tight corners. And while it promised grand touring comfort, the cabin tech aged quickly, and repairs weren't always cheap once the system started wearing down. Still, the Thunderbird SC was one of Ford's most ambitious attempts at blending power with subtlety. It gave enthusiasts something to smile about without needing a Mustang badge to prove it. Up next, we're heading toward a GM sleeper with serious turbo credentials. Stay tuned. 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass Ciera GT. Following the precision-engineered Thunderbird SC, we moved to something a little more under the radar, the 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass Ciera GT. Most people remember the Ciera as a dependable family car, a front-wheel drive A-body that quietly moved groceries and kids around suburban America. But for a brief window in the mid-80s, Oldsmobile gave it a sharper edge. The GT variant took the safe, boxy Ciera and added just enough upgrades to make it interesting. It came equipped with a 3.8-liter V6, churning out 150 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque, respectable numbers for a mid-size front-wheel drive sedan of the time. Paired with a 4-speed automatic, it could hit 0 to 60 in about 9 seconds. Not blistering, but more than enough to catch people off guard in traffic, especially given its humble looks. What made the GT stand out wasn't just its power, it was the subtle enhancements. Stiffer suspension, quicker steering, and a sportier exhaust tone gave it an edge, while exterior cues like blacked-out trim and unique alloy wheels hinted, just barely, that this wasn't your average Olds. Inside, you got bolstered seats and a sports steering wheel, a small nod to performance enthusiasts, but it had its limitations. The transmission was slow to downshift, and torque steer under heavy throttle reminded you that this was still a front-wheel drive economy platform at heart. The car never fully shed its commuter roots, and that's part of what makes it such a hidden gem. It was a sleeper in every sense, quiet, unassuming, and easy to miss unless you knew what to look for. And coming up next, we take a turn into turbocharged territory with a Buick that's been overshadowed for far too long. 1989 Pontiac Grand Prix Turbo Coupe. As we leave the understated Oldsmobile Cutlass Ciera GT behind, we enter a world of turbocharged excitement with the 1989 Pontiac Grand Prix Turbo Coupe, specially built by ASC/McLaren. While Pontiac was mostly known for its muscle cars like the Firebird, this turbocharged version of the Grand Prix flew largely under the radar, and with good reason. It was unlike anything else the brand had produced before. This car wasn't just a performance trim, it was a collaboration between Pontiac and the legendary McLaren Group, who were known for pushing the boundaries of automotive design. Under the hood, the 3.1-liter turbocharged V6 engine produced 205 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. It could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 7.2 seconds. Impressive for a car that still looked like a modest two-door coupe. The Grand Prix's smooth aerodynamic lines, unique body kit, and McLaren-branded details made it appear more like a luxury cruiser than a performance machine. But let's be clear, the power was there. The turbocharged engine provided a smooth, yet potent kick when you floored it. Paired with a 4-speed automatic transmission, the Grand Prix Turbo Coupe was quick and refined, but it had one major flaw: its rare and expensive nature. Only about 1,500 of these cars were made, making it a rare find even when new, and even rarer today. This car might have been a little overshadowed by the flashier models of the era, but it was a turbocharged sleeper with a legacy that was quietly impressive. Want to see more cars like this? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep up with the hidden gems of the automotive world. 1984, Lincoln Continental Mark. Moving on from the turbocharged Pontiac Grand Prix Turbo Coupe, we step into a world of luxury and performance with the 1984 Lincoln Continental Mark 7 LSC. At first glance, it may appear to be just another posh, full-size luxury coupe. However, under the surface, this car was hiding a serious performance edge. The Mark 7 LSC was designed to compete with European sedans, but Lincoln's engineers had other plans, and they gave it a secret weapon: performance. Equipped with a 5-liter V8 engine, the LSC produced 200 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque, which gave it more than enough muscle to move quickly despite its refined, elegant appearance. The 0 to 60 mile/hour time of 8.1 seconds wasn't blistering by today's standards, but in the early 80s, it was more than enough to put this car in the performance category, not just the luxury segment. The car's smooth handling, sharp steering, and sophisticated suspension system made it feel more like a sports sedan than a traditional cruiser, and it managed to do all of this while keeping its quiet, comfortable ride intact. However, there was one flaw that prevented it from being a mainstream hit: its niche appeal. The Mark 7 LSC was a luxury car with performance, but many people were unsure whether to categorize it as a sports coupe or a plush cruiser. As a result, it didn't attract the kind of attention it deserved. Still, it was a bold move by Lincoln and a glimpse into how American automakers were starting to blend luxury with performance. Have you ever seen one on the road? Drop a comment and let me know. 1989, Chevy Beretta GTZ Quad 4 HO. Shifting gears from the luxurious yet surprisingly quick Lincoln Continental Mark 7 LSC, we arrive at a true American underdog, the 1989 Chevy Beretta GTZ. While the Beretta was already known for its sporty design, the GTZ variant was a performance-focused sleeper that most people overlooked. But if you were one of the few who knew what was hiding under the hood, you were in for a treat. The heart of the Beretta GTZ was its 2.3-liter Quad 4 high-output HO engine, a high-revving beast tucked inside an unassuming shell. Small car, big mouth, and a Quad 4 that screamed all the way to 7,000 RPM. It made 180 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque, which was wild for a front-wheel drive coupe in the late 80s. With a 0 to 60 time of about 7.5 seconds, it punched well above its weight. Lightweight, edgy, and loud in every sense, the GTZ wasn't built to cruise, it was built to fight, and it made sure you heard every bit of that struggle. While it excelled in power and acceleration, the Beretta GTZ wasn't without its flaws. The chassis, though sporty, didn't match the aggressive engine, which meant handling could feel a bit stiff on tight corners. Its looks also weren't universally loved. Some found the design a little too conservative for a car with such a potent engine. But the truth was clear. This was a car that offered a fun, fast experience without the flashy reputation. Would you take this sleeper over some of the more obvious performance cars from the era? Drop a comment and let me know. 1985 Buick Electra, T-Type. Finally, you've made it to number 1. And trust me, this one blindsided everyone, even the people who drove it. While the 1985 Buick Electra T-Type was known for its luxury vehicles, the Electra T-Type quietly stood out as a performance car hiding in plain sight. Unlike other muscle cars of the era, the Electra T-Type didn't scream performance, but when you hit the accelerator, it sure delivered. Under the hood, the Electra T-Type was powered by a 3.8-liter V6 turbocharged engine that generated a solid 190 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. These numbers weren't jaw-dropping by today's standards, but in the mid-80s, they were enough to give this full-size sedan a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of around 7 seconds, which was impressive for a car of its size. The turbocharged engine added an extra layer of excitement, making it feel like a true sleeper, unassuming from the outside but capable of delivering quick acceleration when pushed. But like all sleepers, the Electra T-Type had its flaws. While it had the power and acceleration, the handling wasn't as sharp as some might expect from a performance vehicle. Its luxury-oriented suspension meant it lacked the sportier feel of its competitors, making it more of a straight-line performer than a corner carver. Despite this, the Electra T-Type still managed to punch above its weight, offering a unique blend of comfort and performance. 1963 Studebaker Lark Daytona R2. Moving on, we get to a car that truly kept things modest, almost to the point of invisibility. The 1963 Studebaker Lark Daytona R2 didn't shout for attention at all. In fact, at first glance, it looked like something your neighbor might drive to the grocery store or take on a quiet Sunday cruise. But beneath its mild, squared-off lines sat one of the era's most surprising factory setups. Studebaker, already struggling to stay relevant by the early 60s, needed something special to keep buyers interested. So they worked with Paxton to bolt a supercharger onto their 289 cubic inch V8. The result? A respectable 290 horsepower and around 303 pound-feet of torque. In the early 60s, those numbers were no joke, especially in a compact frame like the Lark. When tested, the R2 could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just about 7.3 seconds. A serious figure for a car that looked more like an economy commuter than a performance machine. But it wasn't just the raw numbers that made the Daytona R2 interesting. The fact that this was all factory-backed performance made it even more compelling. Studebaker was offering a street-legal car that could line up next to early GTOs and give them a real challenge, all while keeping a straight face. Plus, thanks to its supercharged setup, the power delivery felt smooth and consistent across the rev range, making it genuinely enjoyable to push hard. Of course, no car is perfect. The Lark Daytona R2 had its flaws, and they were mostly tied to the fate of its maker. Studebaker's financial troubles meant limited production numbers, and with only a few hundred R2s ever built, parts availability quickly became a challenge. Handling, too, wasn't its strongest suit. While the straight-line speed was impressive, the suspension setup wasn't quite ready to match the power when roads got twisty. Still, this is exactly what made the Lark Daytona R2 such a remarkable sleeper. It blended into everyday traffic, quietly carried serious performance, and left those who underestimated it second-guessing their assumptions. And as rare as the Lark R2 was, the sleepers on our list are even more unexpected. Stay tuned, things are about to get a little more deceptive. 1967 Dodge Coronet R T440 non-Hemi. If the Studebaker Lark Daytona R2 was a quiet surprise, the Dodge Coronet R T440 took things a step further with a more serious presence, but still managed to fly under the radar. Moving away from the compact styling of the Lark, the Coronet had the broad-shouldered look of a full-size car, yet it never really got the same spotlight as Dodge's more aggressive models like the Charger. That worked perfectly in its favor. Introduced in 1967, the Coronet RT marked Dodge's first official entry into the growing muscle car scene. But instead of loud graphics and wild bodywork, it kept things restrained. Under the hood sat the mighty 440 Magnum V8, not the headline-grabbing Hemi, but a powerhouse in its own right. This engine produced a stout 375 horsepower and a thumping 480 pound-feet of torque, giving the Coronet RT the strength to rocket from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just about 6.3 seconds. That kind of speed in a car that looked more like a family cruiser than a street predator made it a genuine sleeper. What really made the Coronet RT special was how usable its power felt. The 440 delivered low-end torque that came on early and strong, making highway pulls effortless. Paired with either a 3-speed automatic or a 4-speed manual, it could be both a relaxed daily driver and a weekend menace without drawing unwanted attention. Plus, thanks to its slightly heavier build, the ride quality was smooth and surprisingly comfortable for a performance car of its era. However, there were a few trade-offs. The weight that made it stable on the highway also dulled its agility in corners. And while the styling was clean, it leaned toward conservative, meaning it never quite got the admiration of its flashier siblings. But that's exactly what earns it a spot on this list. And speaking of cars that hid serious muscle behind modest sheet metal, the next one keeps the theme going, but with an unexpected twist from a brand you wouldn't normally think of for performance. 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport. Rolling on from the Coronet, we land on something that wore an even better disguise, the 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport. At first glance, the Skylark looked like the sort of car that blended into company parking lots and church driveways. Practical, well-mannered, and definitely not in a hurry. But Buick had other plans. Tucked away under its plain, sheet metal was a performance secret waiting to be unleashed. In the mid-60s, Buick was more about comfort and luxury than street performance. But in response to the growing muscle car wave, they decided to take their mid-size Skylark and give it some serious muscle. The result was the Grand Sport package, which shoehorned in Buick's largest engine at the time, the 401 cubic inch nailhead V8. It pushed out an impressive 325 horsepower and a thumping 445 pound-feet of torque. Despite the hefty size, the Skylark Grand Sport could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 6.8 seconds, making it surprisingly quick for something that looks so restrained. The charm of this car wasn't just in its numbers, though. Buick engineered it for smooth, almost effortless power delivery. You got that wave of torque early on, perfect for quick bursts of speed without breaking a sweat. Plus, it came with a tough suspension setup that handled the extra weight well, giving it better balance than you'd expect from a Buick of this era. That said, it wasn't flawless. The Grand Sport's steering felt a bit vague, and the car carried more weight than some of its leaner rivals, which dulled its cornering enthusiasm. Still, for those who valued stealthy power over flashy looks, this Buick was a hidden gem. Now, between the Studebaker's surprise supercharger, the Coronet's Brute 440, and Buick's big block Stealth, which of these sleepers has impressed you the most so far? Drop a comment and let me know, and stick around. The next car brings a whole different kind of under-the-radar performance that you won't want to miss. 1961 Chevrolet Biscayne 409. Coming off the Buick Skylark Grand Sport, you might think things couldn't get any more unassuming, but then comes the 1961 Chevrolet Biscayne 409, a car that truly defined the sleeper spirit of the 60s. On the outside, the Biscayne was the very definition of basic transportation. No flashy trim, no racing stripes, no bold badging, and certainly no aggressive posturing. It was Chevrolet's entry-level full-size sedan, aimed squarely at budget-conscious families who needed space and reliability, not speed. Parked at the grocery store or idling at a traffic light, it looked like just another background player on America's busy streets. But here's where the magic happens. Beneath that modest sheet metal, Chevrolet had a brilliant idea. Take their freshly developed 409 cubic inch V8, a serious evolution of their previous 348, and squeeze it into the humble Biscayne. The result was a revelation. This beast of an engine produced 360 horsepower and a thunderous 409 pound-feet of torque. To put that into perspective, this meant the Biscayne 409 could blast from 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 6.1 seconds, which was blistering for a full-size sedan in 1961, especially one that looked like it belonged in a school parking lot or parked on Main Street, USA. What really set the Biscayne 409 apart, though, was its clever balance of power and weight. Compared to its more luxurious sibling, the Impala, the Biscayne's lighter, stripped-down build meant the engine had less bulk to push around. Add to that Chevrolet's rugged 4-speed manual transmission, and you had a factory hot rod that could embarrass many dedicated performance cars of the era. Drivers loved the direct connection they felt with the machine, the raw torque, the mechanical growl of the big V8, and the satisfaction of rowing through the gears, all without the distractions of luxury frills. Of course, being the budget model came with compromises. The interior was bare bones, with minimal creature comforts. Ride quality wasn't exactly refined, and noise insulation was virtually non-existent, meaning you heard every rumble, rattle, and roar. But for enthusiasts, that was part of the charm. The lack of polish only amplified the visceral thrill of unleashing all that hidden power. And if you thought this was the peak of stealthy street muscle, just wait. Up next is a compact underdog that AMC transformed into a genuine giant killer. You don't want to miss this. 1969 AMC Rambler Rogue 390. Following the unsuspecting brute force of the Biscayne 409, the story takes an even more surprising twist with the 1969 AMC Rambler Rogue 390. If you thought Chevrolet had mastered the art of hiding power in plain sight, AMC quietly raised the bar. At first glance, the Rambler Rogue looked like any ordinary economy car. Plain, unassuming lines, minimal chrome trim, and absolutely no flashy badges to hint at the storm brewing under the hood. The kind of ride you'd pass on the street without giving a second glance. AMC, mostly known for building practical, budget-friendly cars, found itself wanting to make a bigger splash in the muscle car scene in the late 60s. Their answer was brilliantly simple. Take their compact Rambler body and transplant the 390 cubic inch V8 from their flagship AMX muscle car. The result? A genuine sleeper that packed 315 horsepower and a staggering 425 pound-feet of torque. All this power stuffed into a lightweight, no-frills shell meant the Rogue 390 could rocket from 0 to 60 miles per hour in a blistering 6.3 seconds. Performance that would catch many by surprise at the stoplight. But the Rogue wasn't just a one-trick pony. Thanks to its smaller dimensions and relatively light weight, it handled tighter corners with more agility than its full-sized, heavier competitors. Sure, it didn't have the sophisticated suspension setups of prissier muscle cars, and yes, the ride could get a little rough when pushed hard. But in the right hands, the Rogue 390 delivered a driving experience that felt raw, mechanical, and deeply connected to the road. It was AMC's rebellious answer to Detroit's muscle car dominance. A compact brawler with a serious punch. Of course, there were trade-offs. Interior quality was Spartan, a reminder of AMC's limited budget, and refinement took a back seat to raw performance. Yet for those in the know, the Rambler Rogue 390 was a secret weapon hiding in plain sight, a true sleeper that could humble much more expensive machinery without breaking a sweat. That might have been a curveball, but from here on out, it's game changers only. You're about to hit the top 3, and trust me, these last ones will seriously mess with your idea of what a muscle car should look like. 1968, Ford Fairlane 500/428 Cobra Jet. After the unexpected punch of the AMC Rambler Rogue, we step into territory that feels just as unassuming, yet far more ferocious beneath the surface. The 1968 Ford Fairlane 500/428 Cobra Jet. From the outside, the Fairlane 500 was about as ordinary as family sedans got. Clean lines, no flashy stripes or exaggerated scoops, and a face that was camouflaged as a grocery getter, but packed a cannon under the hood. But that's exactly what made it such a brilliant sleeper. Ford had something to prove in the late 60s, especially against the growing muscle car crowd. Their answer came quietly but forcefully with the introduction of the 428 Cobra Jet engine. Slotting this powerhouse into the Fairlane 500 turned the everyday sedan into a street warrior. We're talking about a 428 cubic inch V8 pushing out a factory-rated 335 horsepower and a mountain-moving 440 pound-feet of torque. But insiders knew the real numbers were closer to 400 horses, with some drivers clocking 0 to 60 miles per hour in just about 5.8 seconds. Numbers that caught plenty of supposed muscle cars off guard at stoplights. One of the Fairlane's biggest strengths was its ability to deliver blistering performance while keeping a low profile. No loud decals, no oversized spoilers, just raw power tucked inside a practical body. Of course, it wasn't flawless. Its suspension, while decent, wasn't built to fully handle the wild power surging from the Cobra Jet, and the cabin kept things basic with minimal frills. But that was part of the charm. It didn't need flash to prove a point. What makes the Fairlane 548 Cobra Jet especially interesting is how it played the long game. Owners could enjoy the best of both worlds, a car that handled daily chores without fuss, and then, when the moment called for it, surprised just about anyone brave enough to challenge it. And trust me, as we move closer to the final cars on this list, things are only going to get even more surprising. If you're enjoying the ride so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next hidden gem we uncover. 1966, Oldsmobile F-85 442. Coming right after the brute force of the Fairlane 500 Cobra Jet, the 1966 Oldsmobile F-85 442 keeps the momentum alive, but with its own unique flavor. At a glance, the F-85 wore the plain suit of a middle manager, but punched like a prize fighter. But under that polished exterior, Oldsmobile was cooking up something far more potent. The name 442 might sound like just another set of numbers, but it stood for 4-barrel carburetor, 4-speed transmission, and dual exhaust, a clear hint at the muscle quietly waiting beneath. The 66 version came equipped with a robust 400 cubic inch V8 engine, pushing a stout 350 horsepower and around 440 pound-feet of torque. Acceleration? This sleeper could surge from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just under 6 seconds, leaving plenty of so-called performance cars wondering what just happened. The F-85 442 wasn't about flashy gimmicks. It was about delivering serious performance in an understated package. Plus, the engine had a reputation for rock-solid reliability, which made it just as capable for long highway runs as it was for stoplight surprises. Yet for all its strengths, the F-85 wasn't without a few rough edges. While it had the muscle, its weight held it back a bit on twisty roads. The suspension was decent, but didn't fully match the powertrain's eagerness. And the styling, while clean, was almost too subtle for drivers craving visual aggression. Still, isn't there something satisfying about flying under the radar, especially in a car that could put bigger names to shame? Would you take subtle performance over flashy looks? Drop a comment and let me know. And just when you think the list couldn't get more surprising, wait until you see what's coming up next. Number 1 might just be the ultimate sleeper of the decade, one that hid in plain sight while rewriting the rules of street performance. Stick around, you won't want to miss this finale. 1967 Plymouth Belvedere GTX 440. Finally, we've reached number 1 on our list. The 1967 Plymouth Belvedere GTX 440, the grand finale of sleepers. If you've been following along, you'll know we've seen some serious underdogs, but the Belvedere GTX 440, it takes quiet power to a whole new level. At first glance, the 1967 Belvedere GTX didn't look like much. It wasn't a flashy muscle car. It was so understated, it practically dared you to underestimate it. But beneath that simple exterior was a beast ready to pounce. Plymouth's GTX model, introduced in 1967, was essentially a luxury muscle car, giving drivers the best of both worlds, performance with comfort. Under the hood, the Belvedere GTX housed the 440 cubic inch V8 engine, generating 375 horsepower and a staggering 480 pound-feet of torque. This gave it the muscle to put up a serious fight against its competitors while maintaining an understated appearance. This powerhouse could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just under 6 seconds. Impressive for the time, especially considering the GTX wasn't marketed as a high-performance car in the traditional sense. But the real magic was how it balanced raw power with practicality. The 440 V8 engine delivered immense low-end torque, making it a joy to drive on both city streets and highways. Coupled with a smooth-shifting automatic transmission, the GTX offered comfort for longer drives, with the ability to unleash all its power when necessary. What set the GTX apart was its suspension system. Unlike other muscle cars that had stiff suspensions designed purely for straight-line speed, the Belvedere GTX featured a more refined setup, which made for a more comfortable and controlled ride, all without sacrificing its ability to quickly accelerate. The rear axle ratios could be customized for performance or cruising, making it a versatile car for both performance enthusiasts and those looking for something practical yet powerful. While the GTX 440 wasn't as famous as some of its contemporaries, it held its own with impressive specs and an understated look, proving that sometimes the best things come when you least expect them. The GTX quietly owned the streets. No flashy exterior, just pure untamed power. 1975 Buick Century Luxus 455. You're at a stoplight, eyeing up a land yacht with a vinyl roof, white walls, and the kind of chrome trim that screams Sunday church service. You're thinking it's harmless until it roars off the line and leaves you choking on its dust. That's the secret of the 1975 Buick Century Luxus 455. It played the part of a slow, soft cruiser perfectly, big, boxy, and dripping with formal Detroit elegance. But underneath that quiet, buttoned-up look was a 455 cubic inch V8, an engine that packed serious heat when the light turned green. The kind of engine usually reserved for full-blown muscle cars. This wasn't just about size either. The big Buick pumped out around 230 horsepower and a monstrous 370 pound-feet of torque, even in the era of tightening emission standards. In the right hands, it could launch the heavy frame from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 7.5 seconds. Numbers that embarrassed plenty of so-called performance cars still hanging on in the mid-70s. The story gets even better when you realize the Luxus trim wasn't marketed as anything remotely sporty. Buick sold it as a premium, quiet, almost sleepy sedan. No stripes, no spoilers, no aggressive badging, just a giant couch on wheels that could quietly hand you an unexpected loss at the lights. Of course, not everything about it was perfect. The Century Luxus 455 suffered from serious weight issues, tipping scales well over 4,000 pounds. And by 1975, horsepower numbers across the board were dropping hard thanks to federal regulations. It wasn't a track weapon. It wasn't meant to be. But if you happened to line up next to one thinking it was slow, you might find yourself in a world of regret. 1977 Dodge Monaco 440. Thought the last one was sneaky? Get ready. The next machine rolled up dressed like a rolling living room, chrome flashing, hubcaps gleaming. Nothing about it screamed speed. But buried under all that shine was a heart built to embarrass real muscle cars without even trying. At a time when most automakers were trying to soften their image, Dodge quietly slipped a monster into one of the most unsuspecting packages, the 1977 Dodge Monaco. In its most common form, it was the classic oversized American sedan. Flat hood, giant bumpers, and enough steel to survive a demolition derby. But there was a catch. If you knew what box to check at the dealership, you could order it with the mighty 440 cubic inch V8. This wasn't some watered-down version either. The police spec 440 churned out around 255 horsepower and a brutal 375 pound-feet of torque. Even weighed down by government-mandated safety equipment and miles of sheet metal, the Monaco could hustle to 60 miles per hour in roughly 7.8 seconds. Quicker than a lot of so-called sports coupes of the day. And it did it all without screaming for attention. No fancy trim, no sport badges, no hint that this rolling living room had enough grunt to embarrass lighter, flashier cars. But here's the twist. Despite the firepower, the Monaco wasn't built for finesse. It was big, heavy, and drank fuel like it was free. Handling? Let's just say you didn't want to test your luck on a twisty road. Still on a straightaway, the 440-powered Monaco was a silent assassin. An unassuming beast hiding behind square headlights and padded vinyl roofs. And if you think that's crazy, the next sleeper makes even police cars look slow. 1973, Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser 455. You've seen big sedans pull off the sleeper act, but what about a family wagon? One that looked ready for PTA meetings and grocery runs, not back alley drag races. Long roof, wood grain vibes, and a raised glass roof, pure suburban camouflage. That's the 1973 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser. It didn't flash muscle. It didn't need to. Tucked beneath all that family-friendly sheet metal, if you checked the right box, was Oldsmobile's legendary 455 cubic inch V8, turning a humble hauler into a highway assassin. And this wasn't some neutered station wagon version either. The 455 in the Vista Cruiser pushed out around 250 horsepower and a crushing 370 pound-feet of torque, even as emissions laws started choking out the golden era. Thanks to that torque tsunami, this near 5,000-pound wagon could sprint to 60 miles per hour in about 7.7 seconds. Fast enough to make a 74 Camaro owner cry into his coffee. All while your family's groceries stayed cold in the back. The Vista Cruiser wasn't without its flaws, though. Being a wagon, it carried a lot of weight in all the wrong places. Cornering was more of a hold your breath and hope situation, and the brakes had a bad habit of reminding you just how much momentum you were trying to stop. But in a straight line, few cars dared to laugh when this grocery getter roared. And believe it or not, the next car on the list looks even less like a threat, but packs a secret that made it one of the most dangerous sleepers of the entire decade. 1974, AMC Matador Brougham 401. By now, you're probably thinking these sleepers can't get any crazier. But just wait until you hear about the next car. It might look like a family sedan, but its heart was pure muscle. A full-on stealth attack dressed in a tuxedo. The 1974 AMC Matador Brougham might have seemed like a car for the suburbs, complete with plush seating and a suave interior. But under the hood, AMC didn't mess around. The Matador was available with the 401 cubic inch V8, a beast that kicked out a solid 330 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque. Sure, it was no lightweight, tipping the scales at nearly 4,000 pounds, but this thing could still launch off the line faster than you'd expect, with a 0 to 60 times sitting around 7.6 seconds. On the outside, the Matador couldn't have been more understated. A smooth, almost corporate look, the kind of car you'd expect to see pulling into a parking lot on a Monday morning, ready for the daily grind. But just a few seconds later, it could be the same car pulling away from muscle cars that thought they had the race in the bag. Of course, like many of the sleepers we've seen, the Matador had its quirks. The handling wasn't anything to write home about, and the suspension often felt like it belonged on a softer, more leisurely ride. Still in a straight line, the Matador 401 was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Think that's wild? Trust me, the next car up on this list might just leave you questioning everything you know about the 1970s. And if you're loving these hidden gems, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the rest of the list. 1970 Ford LTD 429. You might think you've seen it all until you spot a plush, leather-trimmed land yacht quietly rolling up next to you. And then it absolutely smokes you off the line. Big, heavy, and built for Sunday drives, or so you thought. The 1970 Ford LTD 429 looked like something meant for golf outings and country club dinners, not backroad brawls. But hiding under all that comfort and chrome was a 429 cubic inch V8, ready to hand out some serious street lessons to anyone foolish enough to mistake it for just another boulevard cruiser. With around 360 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, the LTD 429 could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 7.5 seconds. Impressive for a car that weighed over 4,000 pounds and had all the elegance of a corporate fleet vehicle. The engine's torque meant it could easily outrun many muscle cars of the time without even trying, all while cruising comfortably with leather seats and air conditioning. But as with many of these sleepers, the LTD 429 wasn't without its flaws. Despite all that power, the car's massive weight did affect its handling, and the suspension, built for comfort, wasn't exactly race-ready. Still, it was hard to deny the thrill of surprising everyone at the light with a car they thought was just a luxury cruiser. And speaking of surprises, the next car on our list, it doesn't just look unassuming, it practically screams dad car, but don't be fooled. 1971 Pontiac T-37 455. You might be starting to wonder how many more family cars are hiding these kinds of surprises. Well, the next car on our list answers that question loud and clear. It's another unassuming ride, but one that could leave many performance cars in the dust. The 1971 Pontiac T-37 might look like a budget model that came straight out of the fleet sales catalog, but underneath that plain exterior, Pontiac was hiding something truly special. The T-37 was often overshadowed by its more famous siblings like the GTO, but this was a car that packed a punch in the most unexpected way. You could order it with the 400 or 455 cubic inch V8, and either option gave you a powertrain capable of 330 horsepower and up to 500 pound-feet of torque. What made the T-37 so dangerous was the combination of that torque and the car's relatively lightweight compared to its muscle car counterparts. With the right setup, it could hit 60 miles per hour in just 7.3 seconds. And remember, this was supposed to be a basic sedan. The T-37 was an absolute sleeper, capable of dusting far flashier cars when it mattered most. Sure, it had its weaknesses. The suspension wasn't exactly sport-tuned, and the handling left much to be desired for anyone pushing the car too hard in corners. But in a straight line, it was all about raw, brute force. Would you have expected this from a car that looks like it belongs in your grandfather's driveway? Drop a comment and let me know, because up next we've got something that's even more understated, but definitely not to be underestimated. 1970 Mercury Montego MX Brougham 428 Cobra Jet. Blink and you'd miss it. Just another quiet family hauler blending into the crowd, right? Wide chrome grille, cushy seats, a soft ride. Nothing about it screamed trouble, but that's exactly why it was dangerous. Say hello to the 1970 Mercury Montego MX Brougham 428 Cobra Jet. It didn't chase street cred with stripes or spoilers. It didn't need to. Hidden beneath the gentlemanly styling and luxury trim was Ford's infamous 428 Cobra Jet V8, a monster engine usually reserved for hardcore muscle machines. Quiet, composed, and brutally quick when provoked, this Montego proved that the loudest cars aren't always the ones you should fear. With a monstrous 360 horsepower and an impressive 480 pound-feet of torque, the 428 Cobra Jet was more than capable of pushing this seemingly mild-mannered sedan to 60 miles per hour in under 7 seconds. To put that into perspective, this was faster than many of the more serious muscle cars of the time. Yet from the outside, the Montego MX Brougham didn't scream speed. No over-the-top spoilers, no hood scoops, no aggressive body kit, just a clean, conservative look that made it the perfect sleeper. Of course, Montego had its limitations. Being a luxury sedan, it didn't have the tight handling or cornering prowess of true muscle cars. The suspension was geared more toward comfort than performance, making it less agile on twisty roads. But when it came to sheer straight-line speed, few could match the unexpected punch of the 428 Cobra Jet. And the best part? No one saw it coming. Just another unassuming Mercury until it left them eating dust on the way to the next light. 1971 Chrysler Newport 440. Picture this. You're stuck in traffic next to a massive, cushy land yacht. The kind of car you'd expect to see easing into a country club parking lot. Smooth lines, soft ride, not a hint of aggression. You'd never guess it's hiding a storm under the hood. That's the 1971 Chrysler Newport 440. Built for comfort and calm, the Newport's plush seats and quiet ride lulled everyone into thinking it was just another big cruiser. But pop the hood, and there it was, a 440 cubic inch V8, the same heart that powered some of Mopar's wildest street legends. It didn't need flashy stripes or loud pipes to make a statement, just a heavy right foot. The 440 cubic inch V8 engine in the Newport was no slouch. It delivered around 375 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, a powertrain that was more than capable of putting this large sedan in the 0 to 60 miles per hour range in just about 7 seconds. Not bad for a car that was meant to be a daily driver for your parents or grandparents. While its competition was focused on flashy styling and aggressive design, the Newport flew completely under the radar, all while packing some serious power. However, it wasn't perfect. The Newport was a heavy car, and with that came some compromises. Handling and cornering weren't exactly a strong suit, especially with a suspension system tuned for comfort rather than performance. Still, its torque and straight-line speed were undeniable. This was a car that could easily pull ahead of other muscle cars without even breaking a sweat. If you had one of these parked in your driveway, you'd be the last person anyone would expect to be quick off the line. If you're enjoying this list, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next sleeper on our list. It's a real game changer. 1970 Chevrolet Biscayne 454. Now picture this, a plain Jane sedan rolls up next to you. No flashy paint, no racing stripes, just a slab-sided Chevy that looks ready for a grocery run. Nothing about it screams threat, but that's where you'd be dead wrong. This was the 1970 Chevrolet Biscayne 454, one of the meanest sleepers of its time. Hidden under its no-frills exterior was the heart of a monster, a 454 cubic inch V8. Churning out a brutal 360 horsepower and a jaw-dropping 500 pound-feet of torque. This wasn't some high-strung race car begging for attention. It was raw, unfiltered muscle wrapped in an everyday disguise. While others lined up in their flashy GTOs and Challengers, the Biscayne just waited, calm, quiet, almost bored, until the light turned green. Then it would launch like a missile, leaving everyone in a cloud of dust and confusion. No flexing, no noise, just pure blue-collar brutality hidden in plain sight. Now here's the real kicker. The Biscayne wasn't designed to be a street racer. In fact, it was built as a fleet car, primarily aimed at government and corporate buyers. Yet in the hands of the right driver, it could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 6 seconds, easily outpacing some of the era's more famous performance cars, all while looking like a commuter car you'd see at a red light. But of course, no car is perfect. The Biscayne's heavy frame and less than perfect suspension meant that it wasn't the sharpest handler, and pushing it too hard around corners could lead to some serious body roll. But when it came to raw acceleration and knocking down those quarter-mile times, the Biscayne was a force to be reckoned with. Do you think the Biscayne could outrun some of the more famous muscle cars from this era? Drop a comment and let me know. 1974 Oldsmobile Cutlass Salon 455. This is it, the grand finale, the sleeper that takes everything we've seen so far and cranks it up to 11. It's the car that could outrun most of the fast cars of its day while looking like it should be parked in your grandparents' driveway next to their gardening tools. No spoilers, no flashy decals, just an unassuming presence that hit a powerhouse engine capable of crushing quarter-mile times and leaving muscle cars behind in its rearview mirror. Enter the 1974 Oldsmobile Cutlass Salon 455. You might be thinking, wait, wasn't the Cutlass more of a family car? Well, that's exactly what makes this version so sneaky. The Cutlass Salon was designed to appeal to those who wanted a bit of luxury mixed with a practical design. It had the comforts, the smooth ride, and the class you'd expect. But it also had something that most of its competitors didn't, the 455 cubic inch V8 engine. And this wasn't just any V8, it was a beast capable of 230 horsepower and an astonishing 355 pound-feet of torque. The Cutlass Salon 455 didn't scream speed, but it certainly delivered it. With that kind of torque, it could easily launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 7 seconds, which was a respectable feat for any car of that era, let alone one that looked like it was built for comfort, not speed. What made this even crazier was the way it combined both luxury and performance. It had all the amenities you'd expect from a premium car, but when you gave it the gas, it felt like a muscle car. Sure, the Cutlass had some typical flaws. Its size made it less agile, and while it had plenty of power, it didn't have the cornering precision vision of the smaller muscle cars. But in a straight line, it was a hidden gem, a luxury sedan that could take down the competition without breaking a sweat. The 1974 Oldsmobile Cutlass Salon 455 might seem like the king of sleepers, but we're just getting warmed. 1993 GMC Typhoon Turbo AWD V6 SUV. From quiet four doors to fire-breathing sleepers, our list kicks off with a car that looks like it belongs in a DMV parking lot, yet runs with early 90s Corvettes. A basic sedan? Not quite. After talking about a Dodge sedan that smoked vets, let's crank the weirdness up. What looked like a soccer mom's grocery getter, but could outgun a Ferrari 348 off the line? Meet the GMC Typhoon, an SUV that rewrote every rule about what a family hauler could do. Under the hood, a turbocharged 4.3-liter V6, putting out 280 horsepower and 360 pound-feet of torque, sent to all four wheels through a full-time all-wheel drive system. The result? 0 to 60 in just 5.3 seconds in 1992. In an SUV from GMC. Born from the same mad genius team that built the Syclone, the Typhoon was built to brawl in a straight line. It had the body of a blazer, the soul of a muscle car, and the heart of a turbocharged beast. But unlike the Syclone, it had leather seats, upgraded suspension, and came in multiple colors. This was the performance sleeper dressed in luxury drag. But don't get too starry-eyed. It was expensive, quirky, and not built in large numbers. Plus, corners weren't exactly its best friend. Still, an SUV that could gap a Mustang GT in the early 90s? The Typhoon stood as proof. The 90s didn't care what shape your car came in, only that it could move like hell when the light turned green. 1992, Pontiac Bonneville SSEY, supercharged 3.8-liter. You'd think one sleeper sedan from this lineup was enough. But what if the next version got sharper, faster, and even more confident, all while staying just as invisible? From 1992 to 1995, the full-size Pontiac Bonneville SSEI American machine quietly evolved. It still looked like something your uncle drove to Sunday brunch, but under the hood. It carried a supercharged 3.8-liter V6, now refined to deliver 225 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. That translated to a 0 to 60 time of around 6.7 seconds. Not bad for a four-door land yacht with leather seats and wood trim. This one added a sportier edge, a stiffer suspension, upgraded wheels, and sharper steering that hinted, just barely, that it was more than a soft cruiser. Inside, it still offered luxury touches like dual-zone climate control and digital dash readouts, but the real magic was how it moved. Step on it, and this thing surged past slower traffic like it had something to prove. Not everything aged perfectly, though. The styling leaned hard into 90s curves, and the bulky proportions never really screamed speed. Still, it didn't need to, because while other cars shouted, this one whispered, then quietly blew past you on the highway. And the next sleeper, even less flash, even more bite. 1995 Oldsmobile LSS, supercharged 3.8-liter. So far, we've looked at highway missiles that wore family car disguises, but the next one, it dressed even quieter. A car built for realtors, retirees, and country club valets, yet it packed more punch than most muscle cars from a decade earlier. From 1995 to 1997, this big American sedan, the Oldsmobile LSS, came alive with the same supercharged 3.8-liter V6. But in this version, it cranked out 240 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. That was enough for a 0 to 60 sprint in just over 6.5 seconds, all while riding in complete air-conditioned comfort. It didn't shout, it didn't flex, it just moved. This model was quietly tuned for sharper road manners than its badge suggested. It had a surprisingly responsive steering rack and a suspension setup that kept it composed on curvy back roads. The cabin was full of plush leather, wood grain, and a digital dash that felt borderline futuristic at the time. Its only real downfall? Looks. It blended in almost too well. The styling was clean but forgettable, even when equipped with its subtle badging and alloy wheels. And while the ride was smooth, the front-wheel drive setup still struggled under full throttle. Still, this car didn't care about street races. It just waited for the green light and then vanished. Wait till you see what's next. It's smaller, lighter, and a whole lot meaner. 1992 Dodge Spirit ES 2.5-liter Turbo i4. We've seen quiet power wrapped in leather and wood grain. Now let's get scrappier. This next one looked like something your high school history teacher might have driven, but under the hood it was far from academic. In the early 90s, this boxy four-door was armed with a 2.5-liter turbocharged inline-4, delivering 224 pound-feet of torque and 150 horsepower. Not huge numbers on paper, but in a lightweight chassis, they meant business. The 1992 Dodge Spirit ES Turbo could rocket from 0 to 60 in just over 7 seconds, leaving bigger, louder cars scrambling to keep up. Built during a time when its maker was experimenting with compact performance, this sedan was one of the rare few to blend true sleeper styling with actual speed. No spoilers, no scoops, just clean lines, dull paint, and hubcaps until the boost kicked in. And when it did, you'd feel the torque hit hard, even through the front wheels. Was it perfect? Not quite. The handling was average, and torque steer made the front end twitchy under pressure. But that raw, turbocharged surge made every straightaway a thrill. And the best part? Most people never saw it coming. We've got more stealth legends just like this one. So hit that subscribe button and don't miss what's coming next. 1993 Pontiac Grand Prix STE. After the last car proved that turbo torque could come from the most unassuming shell, this next one takes a different approach, more refined, more high-tech, and quietly ambitious. At a glance, the 1993 Pontiac Grand Prix STE looked like a comfortable cruiser for your uncle who liked talking suspension geometry at family dinners. But buried inside was a 3.4-liter DOHC V6, a complex engine shared with GM's experimental W-body performance line. This thing cranked out 210 horsepower and 215 pound-feet of torque, pushing it from 0 to 60 in around 7.5 seconds. Not blistering, but for a sedan that barely registered on radar, it was serious heat. It had advanced features for its time: computer-controlled suspension, four-wheel disc brakes, and a driver information center that felt borderline sci-fi in the early 90s. And it all came together in the 1993 Pontiac Grand Prix STE, a car more sophisticated than it let on. Of course, complexity came at a price. That DOHC V6 was notoriously difficult to work on, and reliability wasn't its strongest suit. But for those few years, it stood as one of the boldest mid-size sleepers America ever produced. 1992, Chevrolet Lumina Euro 3.4. If the last one flexed its muscles through sophistication, this one took a louder, but still overlooked route. It was the kind of car you'd spot in a mall parking lot next to a minivan and never give a second glance. But under that low-profile body was GM's 3.4-liter LQ1 double overhead cam V6, a motor borrowed from more ambitious platforms, pushing 210 horsepower and 215 pound-feet of torque. That meant 0 to 60 in about 7.2 seconds, all while wearing the badge of a family sedan. It came with a sport-tuned suspension, dual exhaust, and sharper steering, all hiding beneath what most people thought was a car reserved for rental fleets. This was the 1992 Chevrolet Lumina Euro 3.4, and for a few brief years, it tried to punch above its weight in a market that didn't know what to do with it. It was GM's attempt at a Euro-style sports sedan, even if it still looked like it belonged in a corporate carpool. Of course, the engine's maintenance needs were a handful, and the automatic transmission held it back from being something truly special. But still, how many front-drive sedans in the early 90s were this gutsy? Ever seen one of these tear past you and wondered what it was? Drop a comment and let me know. 1994 Dodge Spirit RT. After the Lumina tried to act European, this one actually delivered a left hook nobody saw coming, especially from a brand known more for minivans than muscle. It looked like something your uncle drove to the post office. Boxy, modest, totally forgettable. But in the early 90s, the 1994 Dodge Spirit RT hid one of the most aggressive four-cylinder engines ever shoved into a front-wheel drive American sedan. We're talking about the 1994 Dodge Spirit RT, a car that rolled up with 224 horsepower, 217 pound-feet of torque, and a 0 to 60 time of just 5.8 seconds. That's faster than a Mustang GT of the same year. What made it wild wasn't just the power, it was how it made that power. A Lotus-designed 16-valve DOHC head sat on top of a turbocharged 2.2-liter inline-4. This wasn't some parts bin special. It was the most powerful front-drive sedan made in America at the time. but it wasn't perfect. Torque steer was a battle, and the K-car roots made handling a bit sketchy under pressure. Still, when it hit boost, it surprised everyone, especially the guy in the next lane. 1991 Ford Taurus SHO, Yamaha V6. Moving on from the Spirit RT's turbocharged fury, let's talk about something that didn't scream performance, yet absolutely stunned anyone who underestimated it. The 1991 Ford Taurus SHO. On paper, it was a family sedan. Full stop. But under that boxy, unassuming shell, it hid a Yamaha-developed 3.0-liter DOHC V6, cranking out 220 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque. A car built to cruise to Costco, but quick enough to leave a few sports cars in the dust. The 0 to 60 time? 6.8 seconds, which at the time was downright snappy for a mid-size sedan. Its performance pedigree came from a Japanese powerhouse, Yamaha, who tuned the engine to make the Taurus SHO not just a sleeper, but an unexpected performer. And yet, this wasn't just about straight-line speed. The SHO featured an upgraded suspension and tighter handling, giving it a sports car edge that most people missed. But the Taurus SHO wasn't perfect. Its high-revving engine needed constant attention, and some felt the interior lacked the refinement that matched its performance chops. Still, when you heard that V6 scream to life, it was a different world. Would you have ever guessed it could do all that? Let me know in the comments. 1996 Buick Regal GS 3.8-liter supercharged V6. We next have a car that looked like it belonged in a quiet suburban driveway, but with enough power to leave the competition gasping for air. The 1996 Buick Regal GS was a family sedan with a dark side. Underneath the hood, a supercharged 3.8-liter V6 pushing 240 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. It might have looked like your grandparents' daily driver, but once that supercharger kicked in, it could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.5 seconds. For a car with all the elegance of a Buick, that's impressive by any standard. Its smooth ride, comfortable interior, and solid build made it a hit with those who valued comfort. But the real story was how it could handle a drag race or give any sports sedan a run for its money, all while staying under the radar. This car was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it wasn't afraid to show its teeth when provoked. But not everything was perfect. The Regal GS was a bit heavy, which made its handling a little less nimble than other, sportier sedans. Still, for the price and the power, it was a bargain. 1994 Chevrolet Caprice Classic LT1 V8. After the refined yet speedy Buick Regal GS, we now turn our attention to a car that doesn't look fast at all, but don't let its grandfather-friendly appearance fool you. The 1994 Chevrolet Caprice Classic may have been built with comfort and spaciousness in mind, but under the hood sat an LT1 5.7-liter V8 engine, producing 260 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. This powertrain was straight out of the Corvette, and it gave the Caprice Classic the kind of muscle you wouldn't expect from a large family sedan. It could reach 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.7 seconds, making it quicker than many sports cars of its time. This car wasn't just a straight-line performer. It handled surprisingly well for its size, with a smooth ride and a well-tuned suspension. Yet, despite its impressive performance, it remained largely unnoticed by many, especially since its boxy, utilitarian design didn't scream sports car. It was a true sleeper, silently obliterating the competition without breaking a sweat. But all wasn't perfect. Its size made tight cornering less agile, and it was far from the most refined interior. Still, it had a raw power that made it stand out in the right moments. 1998 Oldsmobile Intrigue GLS. Let's look at a car that not only shocked the streets with its performance, but also blended luxury with unassuming speed. The 1998 Oldsmobile Intrigue GLS was a mid-size sedan that defied expectations. Under the hood, it packed a 3.5-liter Short Star V6 engine, delivering a healthy 215 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque. This was enough to propel the Intrigue from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 7.5 seconds. Impressive for a family car. The Short Star V6, while not as famous as some of the bigger powerhouses of the era, was a finely tuned engine that combined both smoothness and power. Despite its sleek, modern design, many overlooked the Intrigue's performance potential. With its unassuming look, it blended in perfectly with other sedans, making it a true sleeper in every sense. The car was built with comfort in mind, featuring a well-appointed interior and a smooth ride, but it also had the chops to take on more aggressive sedans of the time. However, no car is perfect. The steering feel was often criticized as being too vague, and while the ride was comfortable, some found it a bit soft for sporty driving. It's a car that could slip under the radar, but if you were behind the wheel, it was a blast to drive. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that button for more hidden gems like this one. 1996 Lincoln Mark 8 LSC. After the quiet power of the Oldsmobile Intrigue, we step into a car that blends luxury with a surprising performance edge. The 1996 Lincoln Mark 8 LSC was more than just another full-size luxury coupe. It was a true sleeper with an attitude. Under the hood, the Mark 8 LSC housed a 4.6-liter V8, cranking out 280 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. With a 0 to 60 mile-per-hour time of 6.7 seconds, it offered performance that could hold its own against many sportier competitors. The refined suspension and lightweight aluminum body meant the car could glide down the highway with ease, while still providing plenty of power when it was time to unleash it. But here's the catch. The Mark 8 LSC's design was sleek and elegant, almost to a fault. It didn't scream muscle car, so most people were caught off guard when it made a quick getaway. The downside? Despite the power, it lacked the precise handling you might expect from a performance car, and some drivers found the interior a little too geared toward comfort than outright speed. So, was the Mark 8 LSC too much luxury and not enough bite? Or did it strike the perfect balance? Drop a comment and let me know. 1994 Chevrolet Impala SS. Let's shift gears to something with a little more muscle and mystery. A full-size sedan built for comfort, but with the heart of a muscle car? Let's talk about the 1994 Chevrolet Impala SS. When Chevrolet revived the Impala nameplate in the 1990s, they did it with a bang. The 1994 Impala SS came equipped with the legendary 5.7-liter LT1 V8, producing 260 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.5 seconds, a surprising time for a car of its size and design. Its performance-tuned suspension, paired with the potent engine, made it a surprisingly nimble beast on the road. However, this big sedan had its flaws. Despite the muscle car engine, the Impala SS was still a full-size cruiser, meaning it wasn't the sharpest handling car when it came to tight corners. The interior, while spacious and comfortable, lacked the kind of refinement that might have matched its performance credentials. So, what did this car really excel at? Was it a true muscle car disguised as a family sedan? Or was it just a fun, powerful ride with a few compromises? 1997 Mercury Grand Marquis HPP. After the raw power of the Impala SS, let's shift to something that seems like it belongs in the slow lane, but holds a secret under the hood. A car built for comfort, but powerful enough to surprise you on a straightaway? Let's talk about the 1997 Mercury Grand Marquis HPP. The Grand Marquis HPP was Mercury's answer to anyone who underestimated it as a mere family sedan. Under its polished exterior, it packed a 4.6-liter V8 engine, delivering 190 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. This might not sound like much on paper, but combined with a sport-tuned suspension and rear-wheel drive, it could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 8 seconds, which is impressive for a car of its size and weight. But the HPP wasn't all about speed. Its handling was significantly sharper than the standard Grand Marquis, thanks to a sportier suspension and upgraded brakes. However, its hefty frame and soft ride still made it a bit sluggish in tight corners. Was it a true sleeper that could keep up with sports sedans, or just a big cruiser with a bit more bite? 1991 GMC Syclone. And now we reach the top. A vehicle so absurdly fast, it was banned from competing against sports cars because it kept winning. A machine that looked like a work truck but could shame Ferraris in a straight line. This wasn't a Corvette, a Mustang, or anything you'd expect. It was a shadow-lurking monster that flipped the script in 1991. This unassuming pickup was no muscle-bound showboat, it was a silent assassin. Behind its blacked-out grille sat a turbocharged 4.3-liter V6 paired with all-wheel drive, pushing out 280 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. That combo launched it from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4.3 seconds. Yes, in the early 90s. Yes, faster than a Ferrari 348. The truck? The 1991 GMC Syclone. Born from a time when GM wanted to prove it could build something absolutely insane if it wanted to. It wasn't about hauling lumber, it was about smoking sports cars at the lights and still looking like a delivery guy's ride. But even legends have their flaws. It wasn't cheap, it didn't tow much, and the production numbers were limited, just under 3,000 units. And yet, in the right hands, this compact pickup could outrun almost anything on the road. So, was this the most misunderstood American performance vehicle of the 90s? Or the ultimate sleeper, hiding in plain sight? Which one would you throw into a late-night freeway duel? No hype, no logos, just stealth and speed. Drop your sleeper pick in the comments, smash that subscribe, and keep that seatbelt clicked. The next lineup, even more unhinged,